All right, let's just talk about why we would want to always start designing with mobile first. Mobile first is basically about designing the entire experience for a small screen device before the widescreen device. This process is going to force everyone involved to focus on core content and functionality. Simply the lack of available space on a small screen forces everyone to think about what's really critical, what's really important in the layout. Conversely, if you plan and design for a widescreen first, and then at some point you start to interject and add the CSS so that the design is forced into a narrow screen, you're often going to experience unpleasant results. So ideally, the mobile design and development process should be part of all phases of the project, from ideas and sketching to wireframing to prototyping to the design and the development. By doing mobile first in HTML and CSS and then creating media queries for the wider screen, you're going to ensure that the older mobile devices that don't support media queries are going to be serviced properly. You're also going to ensure that your page is not loading things that are unnecessary to the mobile device. I've seen many responsive website designs that have been created by taking a desktop or laptop design and then adding CSS media queries to the end of the style sheet to deliver a responsive solution. And that's something that, if you're just getting into responsive design, that's going to be your initial response because we're all comfortable with creating for the desktop. So then that's how we start. That's how we've been trained to do it. But you don't want to do this because you're going to negatively affect the page load time. So let me just explain this a little bit. If your user accesses the website with a mobile device, the first thing that the browser does is it works through all of the CSS rules and then it hits the media queries and then applies those. So if we deliver for mobile first, we're going to never get to those particular media queries because they're going to be ignored. If we look at code right here, and I'll break this down, I start with CSS that defines what my page looks like, and this is a really simple example, and then I get to these media queries. So this media query says if this device has a minimum width of 700 pixels, make these changes. If the device doesn't have a minimum width of 700 pixels, these changes, whatever's contained in here, is never going to be applied. So if for this mid-range device I was adding a background image or a larger image or more complex styles, they just would be ignored by my mobile device. And then the same thing happens here. So here's my example page. This is my mobile design, and I just kept this really easy and just changed the background color and the font size to illustrate this. Here would be my mid-range design, and you can see that the background color changed, and then it's going to switch to the large screen design as the width of the page increases. So this is just a really quick illustration to demonstrate how we would want to build a page using mobile first. Many times the CSS for large screens is way more complex, so you don't want to have to force the mobile device to work through all that CSS. It also might be pinging the mobile device for more bandwidth use, serving up larger pictures and so on and so forth. You don't want to create CSS that's going to fight with each other or affect the download time. Always write your mobile CSS first. These should be the base styles for all devices, and once you kind of get into this approach, you're going to really be pleasantly surprised on how little code it actually takes to create your mobile-based styles. After you have those mobile-based styles in place, then you're going to create the media queries for the larger screen sizes. If you have large background images for desktop stylings, then they're only going to be downloaded if the user has a desktop. If you use the old desktop first approach, that meant that the image would be downloaded on a mobile device and then simply overwritten or ignored. So you want to have the mobile styles first and then the large screen media query styles last in the CSS file. And that means the mobile device is never going to have to work through all those redundant desktop only CSS rules. Let's take a quick look at our demonstration page. This page is very simple. I just have a div that wraps around everything, and then I simply just have some HTML elements in there, h1s, paragraphs and unordered list. If we look at the CSS, we just have some really basic CSS, and there's not too much here. We have a universal selector that zeroes stuff out. We have some styles on the body. Then I have some specific styles for my various HTML tags. And then I have a rule for the container, which just sets the max width of the container. It sets the background color and adds a little bit of margin and padding. My media queries I have simply are going to overwrite those base rules for container in association with the background color, and I also just increase the font size. And that happens at this kind of mid-screen size and then at this large screen size. So once again, the results are I have my mobile design first, then at some point I get into my mid-range size design, and then finally into the larger screen. So this really is the best approach. This is how you want to be developing your websites. You really want to take advantage of the fact that media queries are ignored by devices which don't understand them. So we want to serve basic layout to the devices and browsers and then enhance for the media query capable ones.